Welcome to the first video of the first module, our very first lecture in other words. This will be a general introduction to the twin concepts of federalism and decentralization and their promises. We're going to jump right in, so please get ready. Now, in very simple terms, federations are political systems where the center and the regions share power, and where territorial self-rule for the regions is combined with shared rule for all. This means we have two orders of government. We have constituent regional states and we have the central state. The two orders of government have different responsibilities within which they are autonomous. And citizens are simultaneously subject to both governments. One would simultaneously be a citizen of both, say, the state of Massachusetts and the United States of America, or both the state of Queensland and Australia, and would be dealing with different levels of government depending on the issue area. This is quite different from the one nation, one state, one legal system unitary states, where a single order of government exists throughout the country, without autonomous regional states. And France would be the standard example of this. Decentralization, on the other hand, is federalism's somewhat less flashy sibling. It devolves some responsibility to the lower levels of administration, but without the full-fledged regional autonomy we see in federalism. As we mentioned in the introductory video, federalism and decentralization are normally studied within the context of the federations of the Western world. The United States, Canada, Germany, Switzerland, Belgium, Austria and Australia are often the cases covered in such studies. Most Latin American countries such as Brazil, Argentina and Mexico are also federations, as well as Southeast Asian countries like India and Pakistan. There is a rich scholarly tradition that has accumulated over the years examining these cases. Of course, both in formal and informal terms, important differences between these federations exist. They don't behave in identical terms. Different issues matter and bring different political actors together. Different controversies pit different orders of government against each other. Even the names of the regional subunits are different. In Canada, they are provinces. In the United States, states. In Switzerland, cantons. In Germany, Länder. That is the plural of Land in German. Regardless of this variation, there are a number of commonalities in the way federations of the West work. And this has been studied extensively, leading to an accumulation of scholarly output over time. In this course, we will combine that rich scholarly tradition with an entirely new substantive context. Since the 1990s, almost all countries to the south of the Sahara have become either federal or decentralized. After some general introduction derived from the scholarship on federalism and decentralization, we then turn our attention to this part of the world. In the last 2 decades following the end of the Cold War, federalism and decentralization have emerged as ways to enhance democracy, bring good governance, and management of diversity in many parts of the world. The proxy wars that had been raging in Africa between pro-Soviet and pro-Western groups ended with the end of the Cold War, and liberal democratic ideas, if not always practices, emerged as the winner of the New World Order. Virtually all countries to the south of the Sahara in Africa are now either federal or decentralized. Some of this process is widely known around the world, such as South Africa's post-apartheid transition to plural democracy with strong provinces. But most such changes elsewhere on the continent have largely been unnoticed. Nigeria, Africa's most populous country and the continent's biggest economy, is a federation. Ethiopia, another major African state, has left its days of civil war and famine behind and has become a rapidly growing regional powerhouse where over 65 ethnic groups live together in a federal system. Formerly unitary states such as Kenya, Uganda, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Namibia and countless others have followed suit with decentralization reforms which stop shy of a full constitutional reform towards federalism, but nonetheless grant local governments and communities a voice that they hitherto had not enjoyed. All these political changes happen while African economies have grown at breakneck speed leading some observers to label the whole thing Rising Africa. Democratization and economic growth have coincided with large-scale political reforms, bringing federalism and decentralization to almost every country in the African continent. Reforms of the 1990s had promised better democracy, prosperity, efficiency, and stability. Federalism and decentralization would enhance democracy, would bring good governance and efficiency, and would help manage diversity in deeply divided societies, particularly in those emerging from civil war and conflict. So, let's briefly visit these three promises. Federalism and decentralization promise better democracy. That is the first promise. By empowering the regional and local levels of government, they intend to bring democracy closer to the citizen, empower local communities, and bring more democratic accountability to politics. Furthermore, regional and local governments are expected to balance off the centre, bringing in a horizontal separation of political power, which is supposed to induce a healthy competition between layers of government. Federalism and decentralization promise to bring in good governance and efficiency, and this is the second promise. Public policies closer to the regional and local levels are more likely to address local diversity and the concerns of the people. Policies would be customized to local circumstances, and this is supposed to improve public policy formulation and delivery. Furthermore, this is a way to avoid the risks of putting all eggs in one basket and allow regional variation in policies to flourish. Regional labs of policy making and implementation, in other words. The trials and errors of this variation are supposed to bring out best practices. The third promise of federalism and decentralization concerns the management of diversity. Almost all African countries are ethno-linguistically diverse. Nigeria's 190 million citizens speak more than 200 languages. The country's 36 federal states make such diversity more manageable. Ethiopia's 90 million citizens speak more than 65 languages and live in 11 regional states, many of them mini-federations of diversity. And on the southern tip of the continent, South Africa's 55 million live in a country with 11 official languages. This diversity is replicated throughout the continent in smaller countries as well. Federalism and decentralization provide territorially based communities a degree of autonomy to manage their own affairs. While conceptually distinct, federalism and decentralization address similar issues and promise similar things. Federalism requires a constitutional recognition of the autonomy of the regional units. That is, they should be almost sovereign in some of the policy areas and insulated against the encroachment by the centre. Put simply, federalism is constitutionally entrenched and cannot be changed by ordinary government legislation. While only Africa's three biggest countries have federal systems and constitutions, decentralization is now virtually everywhere on the continent. In many ways, these reforms are easier to implement because decentralizing political authority to the local government is done through ordinary legislation without large-scale constitutional amendments. The autonomy of the local government is more limited in this decentralization and is initially dependent on the decisions made by the centre. The centre simply devolves some of its powers to the lower levels of government, and in principle, not always in practice, it could perhaps recall these powers. At the end of the day, it is important to highlight that both federalism and decentralization are non-majoritarian political arrangements. That is, they seek to bring recognition and protection to deviations from the majority positions that dominate national politics. They both reject the view of seeing politics through the electoral victory of 50% plus one and recognize the legitimacy of minority views and positions. This is, of course, both about federalism and about Africa. After providing the prerequisite broad theoretical and conceptual lenses, it is especially in the African context that we will seek to expose some of the important issues around federalism and decentralization. These twin concepts have been steadily changing the continent's political landscape in the last 20 years. large-scale political change has coincided with unprecedented levels of economic growth. In the following modules, not only will we learn more about Africa, but we'll be able to put some of the scholarship on federalism, which tends to reflect the experience of the federal systems of the West, in a different light. Now this concludes our first video lecture. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.